Our special guest for today's show is three-time world Speedway champion, Jason Crump. Sit back and enjoy the ride. Welcome, mate.
Thank you.
I know it's three-time world Speedway Grand Prix champ, but there's another world champion in there as well, obviously, which is an under-21 championship. So I just want to clarify that before we get anywhere.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, and it was a good stepping stone.
Yeah.
But nearly 10 years actually between me becoming under-21 world champion until I became proper world champion. So it was a long time.
Wow, it is a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how did you get into Speedway? Obviously, it's a family heritage, but how did you get into it, really?
Well, I grew up in Mildura.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was racing pretty much all over the world, and then when he finished racing, we moved back as a family to Mildura, and you kind of do a couple of things down there. You spend a lot of time water skiing and stuff on the Murray, and the other thing you do is ride motorcycles, ride motorbikes, ride through the bush, ride motocross, or ride speedway. And as a kid, you just ride a motorbike, and then that led into a bit of speedway. Junior speedway there was quite strong at the time, and it's what you did, it's what we all did, and it's probably the reason why there's quite a few from our era, like from that kind of mid-80s to 90s, early 90s period. There was a lot of successful riders came out of kind of Mildura and Adelaide, which is not so far away, through the junior speedway scene.
Because there's something something like in the water there. You've got obviously yourself, Lee Adams. You got the whole Waters family in the road racing side of it, and they turned their hand obviously incredibly well at dirt track, and I think they've had to go at speedway for a bit too. Yeah,
I mean, there's others as well. Jason Lyons is from there, and Mark Lemon, Travis McGowan, and then you go across to Adelaide, which is 350 k's away. There was Craig Hodson and Shane Parker and Shane Bowes and another whole Ryan Sullivan. There was Nigel Sadler. There was a whole gaggle of other decent riders from there. So at one stage the competition there was pretty tough, and a lot of rivalries were formed from a very, very young age that went on from club days at Mildura or Sidewinders or North Arm Speedway to the highest level of Speedway in the World Championship.
That must be pretty incredible for someone, say, like Ryan Sullivan, because you went through pretty much the same sort of time as Ryan as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we raced. We raced each other from probably 1987.
Wow. Through to the mid 2000s.
Yeah, until I think actually we finished the same time as well, around 2012. We competed against each other for a huge part of our careers.
Were you good at it straight away?
Kinda.
Yeah. Okay. Without being cocky.
I mean, it's funny because obviously I went to hundreds, if not thousands, of speedway meetings. So when I got on the speedway bike, it wasn't that I had to figure out how to ride it. I just had to understand what to do on it a bit more, because I'd seen the best riders in the world race. And I had, I'd seen it for years. So all I had to do was work out how to kind of do it and what I was trying to do.
Yep. So you already had the vision there. It's just a matter of applying it.
Yeah, for sure. But it's, it's like everything. You can do it to a certain level, but to be able to go to the highest level, that takes time. And, that's something that money can't buy it. Equipment can't do it for you. You have to be able to understand what you're doing. And that's the hardest part. That's the final step. And that's what takes the time and the experience, and that ultimately that last little bit, the bit that some people are lucky enough to get and some people are unlucky enough that they never get it.
And you have a look at the list of world champions. It's a really elite few, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The ones that are there have won a couple or multiples. You look at your Tony Rickardson, Ivan Major, yourself with 3, Greg Hancock with 4.
Yeah.
Ty's now got... What's Ty got?
Ty's got 3.
He's got his 3.
Yeah.
Chris Holder with 1. The last since the inception of Speedway Grand Prix, there's only been a handful of people at that can get the number one.
Yeah, and that's it's kind of the old one-off world final was so exciting in its in its own right. One day you had to get it. You had to get everything together on that day. You could be, to be honest, you could be reasonably average through the course of the season, and have a good day at the world final and end up with a top 3 or a win. With the Grand Prix, there's nowhere to hide.
No,
you're either on your game for 90% of the year and in with a shot, or you're not. And if you're not, you'd be lucky to stay in the top 8. And if you're not in the top 8, if you don't stay in the top 8 and get your automatic spot in the series, to go through the qualifying rounds. I mean, I'm lucky. The last time I had to do that was 1997, I think. They were tough old days. They were hard, tough, brutal racing.
Because it's a brutal sport.
It's brutal sport anyway, but, when you're racing, when you're going to a race meeting with 16 or 20 riders and the top 2 from those 16 or 20 go into the Speedway Grand Prix the following year, you figure out what brutal racing is pretty quickly.
There's a lot on the line, isn't there? Really?
Oh, absolutely.
That's your whole livelihood, your whole hopes and dreams, obviously, as well.
Yep.
Did you must have got maybe 1 year in the old format?
Yeah, I did. I rode in the last ever one-off world final.
Did you enjoy that more? Or because it was all new, because it was a new thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time ago, obviously, 1994, and I was just 19. I'd only been riding I'd only been on the 500 for 2 or 3 years, and I kind of found myself in the world final, and it was probably didn't really get the best out of myself because I was riding pretty good at that time, of course, to make the world final, but the world final itself was a bit of a disastrous day. I'd had the under-21 world final a couple of weeks before that where I hadn't done very well, and it kind of put me on a little bit of a downer. And the world final itself, it was a funny. I found it a funny experience. I thoroughly enjoyed being there and being a part of what turned out to be the last world final, but I don't honestly think I took that much away from it,
right?
Apart from disappointment at the end of it.
Yeah. Wow. And then
seemed like a big letdown for such a big build-up. It seemed like a big letdown, if I'm perfectly honest.
And I think that's probably, the whole thing about having a grand final on a day. Like for me, I love the format now. I think the format is fantastic.
I think that you can't get better.
Yeah.
I think the way the Speedway Grand Prix is run with the traditional 5. The traditional side of Speedway, which is the 5 heats where everybody races against each other. Yep. You come off every gate position. It's luck of the draw if you've got a good draw or a bad draw.
Yep.
And let's be honest, through the course of the season, 10, 12 Grand Prix, some days you may get a good draw and some days you may get a bad draw, and that's the way it is.
Yep.
But you have to deal with it all, and that's the beauty of it in a 10 or 12 round series. It will even itself out over the course of the year. On a one-off night, it's hard to let that bad draw not affect you in a one-off night.
Yep. So much on the line on that on that particular bad draw, or just something happening. You've got 12 rounds, you've got a point to balance it out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we looked at it, and you could look at races at certain tracks a week before you were racing there, and you would know that, you could look at it and you could go, that race there with the riders I've got in that race and being off that grid position, if I can get 1 point from that race, that's a win.
Really?
Yeah.
So you do the math before you went, okay.
Well, you're not always, but sometimes, if you had time on your hands and you could look at things realistically and plan things out. There were races where you have to be fair on yourself and say that, unless the other guys are having a problem or something goes wrong for them, the best you can hope for in that race is third. That's not being negative. That's trying to control something.
Yep.
And if you can control it and accept that you may get 1 point from that race, then you're certainly in a better frame of mind for your next race, which may be 5-6 minutes later on. You know, if that's actually having respect for the level that your opponents are riding at and being realistic about what you can achieve. Because if you're looking at the worst gate position on a particular track and a particular circumstance, and you think that you're going to go out and beat Tony Rickardsson from that worst gate position when he's off a better gate, a more favourable gate position, that's being disrespectful to your opponent, in my opinion.
How was it racing Tony Rickardsson?
It was tough.
Yeah.
You know, he was a different character to me. He didn't show his emotion probably as much as what I did, but he raised the level of Grand Prix Speedway or Speedway World Championship. He raised the level considerably.
Yeah.
You know, I consider myself fortunate that I raced in an era, albeit the end of an era, with some of the really, really genuinely good guys. Of course, Tony is in that bracket, but I speak of riders like Hans Nielsen and Simon Wigg, Tommy Knudsen, Samuel Malenko. Those sort of guys were, you know, they were icons, weren't they? You know, Hans Nielsen was Mr. Speedway for however many years. He was so consistently good every meeting he rode in, you know, and he was a tough old bugger to race against.
Yep.
You know, he was an old fella when I was racing against him, but he was still a tough bugger. You know, he didn't expect anything, and you could definitely not expect anything off him.
And what about Simon Wigg? Like, same deal. Like, they crafted that sport through an era.
Yeah, Si, with all respect to Si, he wasn't that tough to beat on a speedway track most of the time.
Yep.
You go to Europe to a dodgy old grass track in the south of France on a Sunday afternoon in 40-degree heat, rough as guts and dusty and hot and just all the things that you don't want at a motorbike race. He nearly lap you in a 4-lap race.
Wow.
You know, the long track and grass track was his thing, and I was fortunate that I got to travel with him a bit. He tended to have Australian mechanics.
Right.
A couple of his mechanics were from the Gold Coast. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to get to travel with him and his mechanics to a few events, and he was a good help to me in the early days.
Because I was actually
on the grass track and long track scene was reasonably big then.
Yep. Because I was going to ask you that, because he came over, like, did he have some sort of roots here? Because he came over and did dirt track here, he did a couple of long tracks here. He sort of did spend a bit of time here, hey?
Just like the weather.
Yeah.
You know,
yep.
It's much nicer to be in Australia in November, December, January, February than pretty much almost anywhere in Europe. So he, you know, Si used to spend, he'd be here racing most summers. Most Aussie seasons he was here racing.
Yeah, right. Yep. So it was just, weather.
Yeah.
Enjoy that.
Yeah.
Did you use bold though, hey? The green, bold green. And
you know, he loved it. No, don't think many other people did, but he certainly did.
He did. Samu Malenko. That's another name you brought up.
Yeah, I had a funny relationship with Sam, really. I really enjoyed talking to him away from racing.
Yeah.
On the racetrack, man, we had some ridiculous incidents. I mean, it seemed to me that, look, my dad and Sam had a problem racing in the 80s.
So that's carried through.
And anyway, whatever happened, Sam ended up on his ear and over the fence and whatever. And the old boy was kind of involved in the incident. It seemed to me that Sam tried to take it out on me for about the next 10 years. So I didn't take too kindly to that. So yeah, Sam and I had a few blow ups on the track and in the pits and so forth, but always I don't know how to explain it. I actually thought Sam was one of the best motorcyclists that I raced against, and he always would come up with an excuse of why he'd run into me or knock me off, and I could never accept it. And he didn't understand that I was actually giving him a compliment by saying, "You're a better rider than that. Just admit that you did it on purpose."
Wow.
But no, Sam and I, away from the racetrack, we got on fine, and but again, for a long period of time, he was a tough rider to beat, and one of the old school, get in and get his elbows out and don't expect anything because you're not going to get it.
Because as you said, you come through in a time of some of like literally the best ever. Ivan Major, how did he influence your career? And did he?
Well, yes, he did, because Ivan influenced every Speedway rider's career without even trying, because he was the one that he turned everybody into, I guess if you want to say, he turned riders from club day riders into professionals.
Wow.
He did that, in the 70s without even trying.
Yep.
Personally, I was lucky. I got to know Ivan a little bit. Obviously not in his racing days, but once he'd finished, and he was always very positive towards me. I would always have. It's quite funny. He used to send faxes, like in those times.
Yeah.
He was always somebody who was very mentally aware of what you needed, how you needed to be to go and win. And he used to send you quirky little faxes all the time with diagrams and, just words.
Wow.
And you just positive quotes and different things. So, I enjoyed Ivan's company. I mean, great family. Ivan and Ray had their kids young and traveled the world together, and, Ivan achieved great success, but not as a young man.
Yeah, right.
It all happened basically, he was nearly 30 by the time he was world champion, similar to me.
Yeah.
And he had to work pretty hard to get to where he was, and had a lot of respect for him, because he did, probably between he and Ollie Olsen, they were the two had the biggest influences on Speedway turning out to be the way it is to this day now.
And definitely in this country for Ivan, I think, like with the events.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yep. So, and like the events that he put on and everything as well was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah. He put a lot of events on over here and brought some pretty good riders over here as well.
Yep. Yeah, I have a really fond memory, actually. It's of yourself, of early 2000s, Redcliffe Paceway. They did a long track there.
Yeah, a couple, yeah.
They did 2 years in a row. The one was a damp year, I think. Actually, I might have got a third year in. But it was early 2000s, so you'd been obviously over in Europe racing and everything and come back to race this. And there's obviously they had Jay Springsteen and that come over the Harleys.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It was a really good meeting put on. But I'd never seen anyone... like you were riding the wall coming out of... Do you remember the event at all?
Roughly, yeah. Roughly? I know I had a crash there one night.
It was such a fast track.
It was quite a fast track, but it was very narrow.
Yes.
It was not overly fast for what you can do on a speedway bike, but for the amount of room that we had to race on, it was pretty fast. It was pretty hairy track, actually, that one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up watching that, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Seeing your level coming back from Europe and then to Australia, and that it was a big thing.
Yeah, they were fun times. They were good. They were good events to be a part of.
Yep.
And he, like those things that he did, he used to go to different parts of the country. You'd go to Tamworth and you'd go to Canberra, Bathurst, different sorts of places. That you weren't ordinarily going to. So they were pretty cool.
Yeah, it would have been good to just a bit of a sea change, I guess, at that time too.
Yeah.
So, and some of the riders that came over, obviously the Series 500 stuff was a different thing altogether earlier.
That was David Tapp, and that was
Tap Media, David Tapp. Yep.
Yeah. What he actually did was quite amazing, because he bought actually the best riders in the world here. He bought Ricardson here when he was world champion, and Simon, of course, and Greg Hancock,
yourself,
Sam.
Yep.
If you actually look at the level of those riders, I mean, you had 75-80% of the riders from the world that were here were world championship riders.
Yeah.
Which when you look back at that, the way he did it all, quite amazing. Amazing.
I was actually going to get into that, the tap side of it with the Series 500. Was that, do you ever see it going to that again in Australia?
I would love to say yes.
Yeah.
I don't think for that to work, you have to have a group of riders that want to make it work.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean you have to have a leader in the European ranks, like a Simon Wigg, who can talk to all the riders in Europe and make them understand that it's not like racing with the pressures of racing in Europe. It's race a couple of nights a week and have a holiday in 30-degree heat for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
The riders now, Speedway's changed in the fact that Simon Wigg is a world champion, a multiple world champion, would think nothing of jumping out of bed in the morning and washing his bikes and preparing his bikes for a day.
Yep.
The same as for me, that, if that's what you had to do, that's what you did.
Yep.
There's a lot of the younger generation, the generation of rider now, not only would they not do it, but they probably wouldn't actually know how to do it. So when you look at the riders that Tappy had come over here, you had Ricardson, who was obviously he could work on a bike if he had to. Greg Hancock could, Simon could. You had guys like Tony Casper, who unfortunately Tony passed away through illness quite a few years ago now. Rooney Holter, Joe Screen, Mark Lorem. He had loads of good riders like that. But everybody that came here, there were no prima donnas. Everybody was able to do what needed to be done. So to say, can we get back to that? Maybe, maybe not, because I don't know if there's a level of rider out there who would be prepared to come and do it.
Makes sense.
But we were, we all went to Perth and Bunbury, so we went to Western Australia, and it was one truck with all the gear in it.
Yep.
So you'd race the meeting, and then the next day everybody would meet up at we'd be got somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning at somebody's factory or warehouse with a couple of pressure washers, and we've kind of got there'd be 25-30 Speedway bikes and bits and pieces everywhere, and everybody's just in getting their bike ready for the next night or the night after, so you could put it back in the truck. It was at the time, it seemed like it was tough and hard, and probably didn't want to do it, but it was character building, and it was pretty good fun when you look back at it.
And you've got the best Speedway riders in the world. A handful of the best Speedway riders.
We did have. There was, there was the European names that I've mentioned, and, they were tough to beat. Greg Hancock, anywhere, any time in the world, he's
Billy
a
Hamlin.
tough guy to beat. Yeah, I think Willie was here for a couple of years, or at least 1 year, and Ronnie Corey, and there was good riders, but the Aussie boys were the harder ones to beat.
Really?
Definitely.
Just that home, just that Aussie.
Yeah,
whatever
I
it
mean,
is,
Lee, with all due respect to Lee, from my point of view, Lee was harder to beat in Australia than he was in Europe. He was tough to beat everywhere, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But Lee was a different level of rider in Australia. And if you take him to Mildura or Adelaide, and he was even tougher to beat.
So that's one of the races that you get to and you think, okay, like go to Mildura with Lee Adams.
For sure. 2007, I rode in the Australian Championship, and I was quite confident that I would win the series, but I didn't think I would win the round in Mildura.
Wow. Yep. Because of Lee Adams.
Well, it's tough to beat there. It's his home track.
Respect.
Have some respect for what your opponents are capable of, and be realistic. Yeah, I could beat Lee there, but am I going to beat him 2 times in one night? Probably not.
Yep.
You know. Wow. But that's the way I looked at it.
Yep.
It wasn't that I was going there beaten,
no,
but realistically, I'm saying if I go there tonight and Lee beats me, I'm not going to bash myself up about it, because he is a bloody good rider, and you know the chances are that he's probably going to burn me off at some point in a 5-round series.
Yep.
He's going to beat me at some point.
Yep. And you did end up getting that title, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
2007.
Yeah.
So because that was Mildura, they finished at Mycatcher. Oh, they had Mycatcher in that one.
No,
they?
we didn't. I didn't race at Mycatcher. I raced at
What was that one? I was just trying to think. 07.
The last round was at Mount Gambier on the sprint car track.
How was that?
Tough. Fast.
Yep.
It's tough to race on. Those places, they're kind of fun, but you also know, you understand the consequence if you fall off on a place like that, because you're going fast.
Yeah.
And anything that you're going to hit on that track is designed to stop a sprint car. So for a body or a bike, it's going to be a big hit.
Yeah, definitely a risk. Risk, that one.
Yeah.
How do you think with Elite League and that, coming into obviously Grand Prix and then Elite Leagues and that, do you think the schedule's too much for a rider, or what do you think of that?
Well,
it's dependent on the rider, I guess, too, what they want to race, I guess.
The schedule can be what you make it.
Yep.
You know, you go back to probably anywhere from 1994-5 time. I was racing in the British, Polish, Swedish, and sometimes Danish league, as well as the Grand Prix. And to be honest, there's not that many, and that wasn't just me at that time. That was the whole bunch of top guys.
Yep.
You know, myself and Lee and Greg and Tony and Lorem and Chris Louis, Ricardson. Everybody was doing that. That's how it was.
Yep.
Now, now the riders seem to ride, Polish league and the Grand Prix. A lot of them don't even compete in Swedish league. So I think Ty, Fredrik Lindgren, Leon Madsen, Seiferdinov, Janowski, I'm sure they only ride in Polish league and Grand Prix. Zmarzlik would ordinarily be riding in Sweden and Poland, but this year, because of what's going on, they're all just riding in Poland, and the Grand Prix aren't even decided yet. As far as I know, I don't think there's any dates set for them.
Because and without figures in that, for a lot of like Grand Prix, there's not heaps of money in the Grand Prix, is it? Like the wage earner for most riders would be the league?
Polish league.
Polish league's the wage earner, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. So you have to go there to make your income.
Yeah.
And then Grand Prix supports you in, obviously you get exposure. Yeah. And whatever else comes from that as well. And it's the elite form of the sport.
It's elite. It's extra. Polish extra league is where you earn your living, earn your money from.
Yep.
I mean, the Swedish league used to be good. Used to be a good paying league to ride in. It goes in cycles. Sweden,
Really?
The economy in Sweden determines very much what the pay rates in Swedish Speedway will be.
Those two World Cups you did, obviously that you won. Are they highlights?
The first one The first one was, yeah. We won the World Team Cup.
Yep.
The World Team Cup is a Speedway World Cup. So we won the World Team Cup in 1999.
Yep.
That was pretty cool. To be able to do that. That was tough. But 2001 was the inaugural Speedway World Cup as it's been renamed and like up until now. That was in Poland, and don't know how you would describe that, but that would be like the Socceroos going to Moscow and winning the World Cup.
Just
for us to be able to go to Poland and beat the Polish team, the team that Poland had at that time in their own backyard, we don't get the recognition that we deserve for that.
No.
That was probably, well, I don't know. I mean, I was part of it. I remember how good it was to win that World Cup, and obviously I had a couple of good meetings. The qualifying round was in Gdansk, and that was pretty tough. We had to beat, I think we had the USA in the qualifying round, and that was Greg and Billy. So that was a pretty tough qualifying round. We won through and qualified directly into the final, and the final came down to the last heat with myself against the Polish guy Krzyzaniak, and unfortunately he crashed on the first turn, so it was a reasonably easy race for me, but it didn't start out easy. I mean, we were in a stadium of 30,000 people, and genuinely there was probably 10 people that wanted Australia to win it.
Yep. Wow.
So
so that 01 is
the 2001 Speedway World Cup is definitely something that I'm very, very proud of. And the team that we did it with, it was a good bunch of guys that we all seemed to get on reasonably well. The truth of the matter is that we didn't all get on that well together, because you're not going to get guys that are racing each other all the time that get on that well. No. But when we did race for Australia, we did get on professionally very, very well. And it was actually frustrating for me to think that we did only win a couple of World Cups. We probably should have won more. But there was a couple of our riders that tended to underperform in the World Cups.
Yeah, right. Well, just the heat of the moment sort of thing? Or?
That I can't answer really, but just when you look at riders' performances, and then you look at the level that they were riding at almost every week, and then you'd look at a World Cup result, there's probably a few that tended to underperform for Australia.
That should be, like, say, 01 should be one of the, most recognised Australian sporting moments. Like, it is a huge moment in Australian sport. It was, yeah.
I believe it was.
Yeah. Stealing that away from Poland.
Yeah. I mean, I understand Speedway's not a mainstream sport here. Yep. So people would tend to probably not understand the significance of that. But from my point of view, and I could probably just about guarantee if you rang Lee Adams up or Craig Boyce or Todd Wiltshire, they would probably say the same thing to you, because the significance of it being in that stadium, the way the atmosphere was, it was geared up. The only thing that didn't have Poland's name on it was a first place trophy. Everything, it probably bloody did have. They probably had to swap it for us, but... for us to be able to do what we did, I thought was pretty special. I'm proud of that night as a team, as an Australian Speedway team. I think that was our best performance.
Yep. What happens that night? Like you say, not everyone gets on, but is there a party? Is there
No, we went
back to work.
We went back and stayed in a hotel, and drove the next day to Lesno and raced against Lee Adams in a Polish league match.
Really?
So we went from being teammates on Saturday night for the Australian team to racing against each other Sunday afternoon in a Polish league match.
So fiercest competitors again.
Absolutely,
next night.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's the interesting part of the sport, isn't it?
For sure, because, the way Speedway works is that Saturday night you race against a guy in the World Championship, and Sunday afternoon, Tony Rickardson and I were teammates in Poland for a year.
Yep.
So we were genuinely the top two riders in the world of Speedway, beating chunks out of each other on a Saturday night trying to be world champion. Yeah. And then Sunday lunchtime, we're teammates racing for Torun in the Polish league.
Wow. That would have been a crazy time.
Did
you get much out of Tony Rickardson then? Like, learn much, or was there anything?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
That whole year there sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite funny because obviously Tony and I were the top two riders in the world at that time, and a new sponsor, the Polish Speedway relies heavily on financial investment, backing sponsors and so forth. So there's a new guy came into the Speedway Club in Torun, and he clearly had a pocket full of money, and he decided that the best way for Torun to win would be if he got the best two riders in the world. So he got Tony and I, but he didn't kind of understand that you needed to have more than two good riders. You also needed to have kind of some decent riders underneath that. But more importantly, you need people who are going to get on and work together. Well, Tony and I actually turned out to be not too bad, but the rest of the team, it didn't really work, and we didn't win the league anyway. But in the first part of the season, Tony and I would fly in on a Sunday. We'd be on the same aeroplane going to the same airport, and the club would send two cars, one to pick him up and one to pick me up. And the two guys would actually have a race with us as passengers in the car to see who could get to the track first, and it was bloody stupid. So after we've done this about 6 or 7 times, I said to Tony, like, do you have a problem to share a car with me? Yeah. And he's like, no. I figured you must have had a problem that you didn't want to share a car with me. And I was like, no, not at all. So it kind of turned out that the club had taken it upon themselves to have a vehicle each for us. Well, we didn't need one. I mean, you can sit in a car with somebody for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's not the end of the world, is it?
Surely not.
And it was actually safer for us because the guys that we had driving, stopped racing each other. So it was a bit of a less scary drive after that.
Wow. And how long did that go on for?
That was just a season. But it's 24 meetings or something.
Yep. Wow. That would have been a good time, like such a good time for Speedway, hey?
Yeah, it was a tough, it was tough racing. I mean, Tony was a tough guy to race against. He was a great teammate. It was a great guy to be in the same team with, because he obviously scored points. So it was probably the only time I've been in a team where I wasn't the out and out number one, because he was a world champion and I was number 2 in the world, but I did actually have a higher average than him, points average in the Polish league at that time than what he did. So yeah.
Was that probably one of your better years in Elite League? Did you enjoyable? Was that an enjoyable year there, or?
It was okay, but the only time that, to be honest, in Poland, it's all about winning. So
you don't get time to really.
Not really. There's a lot of stress involved in Polish league, and there's a lot of pressure from the clubs and from the sponsors and from media over there. So Polish league is genuinely all about winning, and I was fortunate that one of the teams I was in after a few years after that, we won the league, and that was fantastic. But it's a tough old game in Poland.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, definitely is. It's like the head of the sport at the moment, isn't it? Really,
without a doubt, it's been. People within Speedway are arguing all the time about, where Speedway's biggest, but pretty much in the whole time of my career, Poland's been pretty much the number one place for Speedway. Yeah, the powerhouse, the place where everybody wants to go. You speak to a young you speak to a 15-year-old kid in Australia about where he wants to go to race speedways, Polish league, you know, and that's right. That's where it's Speedway's king in Poland.
Yep, that definitely makes sense. 2004 was your first world title, Speedway Grand Prix title.
Yeah.
How did that feel at the time? Like, it came down to right to the line too, didn't it?
Not quite, but yeah, the way it looked in the scores, it did. But it was, I kind of had it sorted out. I
Mathematically, you had it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to get through the first stage of the elimination on that night, and I did that. So, I mean, yeah, it was a kind of a shit. What's the word I'm looking for? It's hard to explain it, but because I'd been the runner-up for the 3 years before that, you know, 2001, 2, and 3, I'd been second, and you know, with all respect to Tony, I think in 2001, probably think I was the best rider in the world that year. I think I probably could or should have been world champion that year, apart from a bad first Grand Prix. You know, there was 6 Grand Prix in 2001. There were 6 Grand Prix. I had a shocker in the first one. A terrible night in Berlin, temporary speedway track, pouring down with rain, and it just didn't work for me. But in the remaining 5 Grand Prix, I had 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a third. And that, you know, that was a level that Tony and I were racing at that year. And yeah, he had the same. I had 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third, and a 12th. He had 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third, and a 9th. So, you know,
splitting it, hey.
So that was kind of disappointing. The World Cup in 2001, I went through the whole World Cup undefeated. You know, I beat Tony a few times in the World Cup that year as well, and I thought I was probably close to being the best rider in the world that year. Then the following year, 2002, didn't have a great year, but finished second again. 2003, I messed up that. I should have won the world championship that night as well, but made a bit of a balls up in the last Grand Prix and got excluded in the race that would have won it for me. So finally in 2004 to win it was a very special feeling and a very special thing to happen, and to become world champion at anything's something that you never forget. So,
and like a sense of relief?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Just pressure.
Because, you know, I'd been close, and like I said, if I wasn't the best rider in the world, I was pretty bloody close to it for a few years, and it was tough to be the runner-up a couple of times.
How was Nicky Pedersen in that time to ride with?
What as a
competitor? Like,
he's a fierce competitor.
Fierce competitor. Yeah.
He was fearless.
Yeah.
You know, and
because he got 03, didn't he?
Yeah, he kind of stole. Yeah, he did. I mean, Nicky was riding for a few years before that, of course, and you know, and all of a sudden in 2003, he kind of went from kind of being somebody who was very hit and miss to he gained some consistency, and he was a hard, but he's, as everybody knows, is a hard bugger. You know, tough as, and didn't leave anything. He left nothing on the table any time you raced him. Probably took more chances than Tony and I. He'd take more chances in one race than Tony and I would take in a season.
Yeah. No,
and it caught up with him, you know, like he's you know, how do you say it? He spent a lot more time on his ass than probably what Tony and I did.
Yeah.
For a big period of time.
Because like even now, like he's back riding again too now.
Yeah,
isn't
he rides still. Yeah,
back again. But he spent this last 5 years of just heavy injury too. Hey.
Well, he's out of the World Championship, so you probably don't see how much he's still riding.
Yep.
You know, when a guy's out of the Grand Prix, but you know, he was there was a tough bunch of guys at that time. I mean, Nicky was obviously one of them, and Thomas Golub was in there still, and Greg, and Lee was there or thereabouts, and
sort of like a new era at that point too, wasn't it? Do you think? Like
that kind of happened when around the late 90s, when Hands stopped and everything, there was Mark Loram, Chris Louis, Peter and Mikael Carlson, Henrik Gustafsson, Thomas Golub, Hampel, Hancock, Hamill, Joe Screen. There was a lot of riders that were hard to beat.
And definitely a tough time. So much depth in the sport.
Yeah.
And then you repeated it again in 2006.
Yeah, I was pretty good at 2006. I was probably I was better in 2006 than I was in 2004. I think I planned in 2004. I hadn't won the World Championship, so I didn't really know or understand how to win. But in 2006, I thought I was pretty good all year. Really, I was top of the averages in the UK. I was racing with over an 11-point average in the UK. Top of the averages in Poland. Won the league in Poland. Australia nearly won the World Cup in the UK. 2006 was a good year.
Yeah, and just the whole Grand Prix series was a great series for you too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I had it won in the 7th Grand Prix, 7 out of 10. I think 7th Grand Prix of the year. I think I had it won already.
Yeah, I
think I'd won 4 of the first 7 or something that year. So I was, that was a good year for me. I was very consistently on form that year.
And then to back it up again in 2009, and was that harder?
2009 was that was pretty tough because I got an injury at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And the last couple of Grand Prix were very, very tough. I had a big lead in the series, and just with a couple of Grand Prix to go, I got injured, got my arm caught in a back wheel and ripped a whole load of skin off my arm and did a lot of damage to the muscle, to the bicep and to the nerves and everything in my arm, and actually struggled to ride the rest of the year. I couldn't ride in any of the league racing, only rode in the Grand Prix, and that was tough. And came down to, I think I had to score 7 or 8 points in the last Grand Prix, and I, luckily for me, I did. But that was tough.
Did Red Bull come on board with you that year?
No, I started with them before that. 2009, I started with them.
Earlier 2009.
Yeah.
How did that help? Like, did they go in the whole resources of Red Bull training and whatnot for that as well?
Not so much with that, but I mean, they were a fantastic company to be involved in. I was obviously good friends with Mark in the Formula One. He was driving for Red Bull Racing at the time, and got a fair bit of mechanical help from them. The Formula One factory was at Milton Keynes, which was about half an hour south of where we were living in the UK, and a couple of the guys in the factory were Australian guys, so they were very keen and interested to help me out with a few bits and pieces. So it was a great tie-up, to a great company to be involved in, and of course the relationship carried on over into Australia, and I got to race in the Red Bull celebrity car race at the Formula One race in Melbourne in 2012, and
that would have been good fun.
It was great fun, hanging out with Robbie Madison and a few of the other Red Bull athletes for the weekend was actually really good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's one of those brands that does tie things together, doesn't it?
Yeah, they do. And it's actually funny because Seth and I were watching Seth, Mel, and I were watching the Formula One review of the season 2012 on Netflix the other day.
Yeah.
And the Formula One race from Silverstone came on, and I said to Seth, "Oh, keep your eye out." I was at this race with Mark, and I was actually in the pits with a set of headphones on, listening to what was being said. And Seth looked at me, yeah, good on you, Dad. Anyway, about 2 minutes later, he goes, "No way, there you are." And there was a scan of the pit garage inside the Red Bull Racing pit, and there I was, stood in there.
Wow.
So that was quite funny. So yeah, Red Bull obviously tie in.
Yep.
Because of our friendship with Mark and his wife Anne, Mel and I have been to a few events with them, and it's great to be involved with him as a mate. And obviously the Red Bull thing tied in nicely as well for both of us.
Do you know if he may have ridden yours? Has he ridden a Speedway bike? Do you know?
Never.
Because he's a big fan too, isn't he?
Huge fan.
Yeah.
He and Anne, huge fans of Speedway, and fortunately for myself, he was a big help in many different ways. Of course, he was influential with the Red Bull, with my Red Bull contract, and just as a mate, he was somebody that I always knew that I could ring him and talk about racing in ways that you struggle to talk to that many people about. And I hope he felt the same way that he could talk to me. So it was great to have somebody like him that you could talk to about racing stuff.
Yep, the real ins and outs of it.
Yeah, and he even though he never rode a bike, I've never driven a Formula One car, but obviously you talk to each other as mates about things that are going on, and you try and understand what the other person's saying, and he's pretty good. Mark's actually got quite a big knowledge of Speedway because he's an intelligent guy and he's watched a lot of it, and because he's interested to understand what you're doing and why you're doing things. He's got a bloody good knowledge of Speedway and a good understanding of it as well.
Very smart person.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And to drive one of those things, you have to be too. You have to be intelligent.
Yeah. They're not like going and jumping in a. It's not even really like driving a car, is it? The way the controls and everything are, but
there's so much to think of. It's more like a fighter. You're like a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
So much to process at that time.
Yeah, and not a lot of room to do it in.
No, things are pretty small, hey. Your the bikes. Do the bikes, like, generally, honestly, do the bikes have much influence over it?
Yeah.
It's a big thing?
Yeah.
So each year you get to, say, 2006, you get to the end, you've won the title. You're happy with the bike, you stay with the same engine. Can you tell me how that works?
Very, very, very strange with the engines, because there's no factory engine in Speedway as such. Like you have either a Jawa or a GM.
Yep.
And I was a works Jawa rider for 5 or 6 years. In 2004 I won the world championship on Jawa as a works rider. But we used to take the engine from the factory, like take it off the production line in the factory, and we take maybe 10 or 15 engines at the start of the year or the end of the previous year. And I had people that would prepare engines for me. So I had some guys in Australia who would prepare some engines for me. I had guys in Europe that would prepare engines for me. So basically all of the tuning and setup of the engine came down to me, to my preference. So when you hear the Speedway riders saying, oh, they're trying to find the setup with the engine and they're trying to find this and they're trying to find that, what they're kind of saying is that it's not that their engine's bad, but it's just not really doing what they want it to do. And because there's no electronics and there's no power curve to change on a speedway bike, it's all manual.
Yeah.
You have to, if you want to take a bit of power out of the engine, you do it manually by taking the ignition cover off, and you undo the 3 screws and you retard the ignition timing.
Yeah.
There's no injection. It's carburetor. So you have to set your main jets up for the weather.
Yeah.
It's very leveling mechanically.
So
You have to set it up yourself. You have to get it. You have to make the carburetor work yourself. There's no book. There's no weather. There's no, start it up and let it idle and it automatically tunes itself. There's none of that in a speedway bike.
Wow.
So you have to...
Still very raw.
Very, very raw. No rider aids at all.
Which is hard to fathom now, like in sport.
Can't really have a rider aid on a speedway bike. How do you stop? Why would you stop the back wheel spinning?
That's your
we
drive.
wouldn't even get round the corner if you didn't have the back wheel spinning.
just go
So
straight,
you can't.
You can't
you know,
do it. Yeah, it's
out the window.
just in the world of rider aids and driver aids and that. It's just hard to fathom now that there's a sport that just is still in its probably purest form.
Well, it is hard to believe, but
Yep.
when you put it that way,
Yep.
we make it round the corner because the wheel spins.
Yep.
Then how do you have a rider aid? You can't.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Makes zero sense. For the Elite League, same deal. From someone that doesn't know anything about it, logistically, do you have bikes set up in Sweden? Do you have a bike set up like a van and a mechanic? How would that work in your time that you were doing that?
Yeah, exactly like that. Had a setup in pretty much every country.
Yep.
So I could just jump on an aeroplane and fly to Poland, and I had a mechanic, vehicle, bikes there, race in Poland, fly back to the UK, get picked up by another mechanic, another set of bikes, another set of gear, race there, then fly out to Sweden the next day and meet another mechanic with another set of bikes and ride there.
Wow. So and you, instead of racing, say like we go to MotoGP, everything's a team, this team that. You're the employer of the team, aren't you? You're the So you're
all
team manager, rider, everything.
Yeah. So I was a rider, and my wife Melody she pretty much ran the team.
Yeah,
but
right.
I'd say pretty much she ran the team.
So you're in charge of sponsorships, like Melody.
Yep.
Sponsorships, logistics, getting you to flights.
Yep.
There's no other people involved in this, is it?
No.
That's huge operation, isn't it?
Yeah, she had flights to organise all the time. She had ferry tickets to organise. She had hotels to organise.
Yep.
Paying wages, paying bills, running the household. That's what she did, and she came into that. She'd never been to a speedway event before she came to Europe. Before she came to England, she'd never
Really?
been and seen it. So, yeah.
How can you describe, say, Cardiff?
Yeah.
I've never been. How's the feeling of going into Cardiff on that night?
Cardiff is nuts. It's funny there because the pit area is under the stadium. So when you go into the stadium, when a rider enters a stadium at Cardiff, you go into a dodgy little gate through a rubbish car park.
Really?
Honestly, a rubbish car park. And the stadium's kind of on top of you. So you're underneath. And the pit area is also in the car park, which is under the stadium.
Yep.
So you can go into the stadium and into the pit area without actually seeing anything to do with the stadium just about. You see like one back side of the stadium.
So you could basically not even know you're there.
Pretty much.
Wow.
And where the pit area is, there's like a perimeter road, I guess, around the outside of the football pit, the soccer pitch, which is but you're under it.
Mm.
So you go along that perimeter road bit, and then all of a sudden there's a lane off to the left, and it's uphill all the way, and that brings you out into the stadium. It's crazy.
That's it.
See it.
Well, you just expect, like from TV, you watch this, probably best stadium in the world.
Yeah.
You just see this, you don't expect that to be that.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a perimeter road that turns into a pit area for the Speedway. But you can sit in that pit area and you would have no idea that you're underneath a 60,000 person stadium.
Really? Not a clue.
Wouldn't have a clue.
So you don't hear the fans?
You can when they start to make a noise, but what you have to remember is that it's a pit area, so there's generally a motorbike being started up or warmed up at some point or another.
Yep.
So because it's all concrete, it echoes to buggery in there. It's like it gets hot, like really, really hot in there.
Yeah.
And it's always dark. So you can kind of walk in there at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yep.
And you go from perfect sunlight outside to darkness because you're under the stadium and it's all artificial light. And then, of course, the stadium roof's closed, so it could be bloody midnight. You wouldn't have a clue what time of day or night it is.
That'd be weird.
It is.
It'd be really strange.
Weird. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Going there as a spectator, total different story. You get in there.
I've only been there once without riding.
Really?
Yeah, I went back a couple of years after I finished with the Grand Prix to work on the British TV broadcast of it.
Yeah.
And actually picked up about 15 things to do with the stadium that I'd never ever noticed before.
Really?
Never ever noticed.
So you're like, when you go in as a rider, you've got your own thing. You just do that. You go downstairs.
Never saw the sign that said, welcome to Cardiff Arms Park or whatever it used to be called. I'd never noticed it before. I never knew there was a picture of me on the wall in the hallway that we used to walk along to get to the dressing rooms. I'd never noticed it.
Wow.
Just different things that I suppose when I was going there, I was going there to race.
Yeah.
And didn't notice it.
Yep.
Just never recognised it.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, and I guess when you're going through the motions of racing and that's you got to pretty much focus on one thing, don't you?
Try to.
And you, as a competitor, you're pretty passionate, hey?
Well, I put a lot of effort in.
Energy, effort, yeah.
So I kind of really did mostly only go to the races to try and win, and meant a lot to me.
Yep.
I had a lot of pride in my performance, and I think to finish inside the top 3 in the world for 10 years straight shows that I had a lot of pride in what I was doing and in my performance, and for that 10-year period between 2001 and 2010, I think I was, if I wasn't world champion, I was pretty bloody close to it.
Sure.
Every year for 10 years, and I'm proud of that. I think it'll be a long time before another rider can go 10 years being inside the top 3.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And having 3 world championships as well. I think that's for an Australian rider, it could be a long time.
Yeah, there's always good Aussies around.
Yep.
Chris won in 2012 and then, got beaten up pretty bad in 2013. Yep. And, it's been well documented that, since he had that big crash, he's kind of not quite, he's had the odd meeting where he's been really good, but he hasn't been able to find a good level of a very high level of consistency.
Yeah.
And of course he's not in the world championship anymore. And then we had Jason, Darcy came along around that time period as well. We know, Darcy's unfortunate injury. We've had Jason Doyle come onto the scene and become world champion, and you wouldn't put it past Doyle to be world champion again.
For sure.
I think he's also taken a lot of beating.
Yeah.
You know, he's been injured quite a few times. He's tough. Like, he's a tough dude.
He's tough human, yeah.
Some of the hits that he's taken have been huge, and he bounces back, and you know, I definitely wouldn't put it past him. But saying that, he's not a young man anymore. You know, he's in his mid-30s now, and you know, the group of young fellas. I wouldn't rule him out. I'm not saying I'd rule him out from being world champion, but the group of young fellas that are coming through now, Janoski, Dudek, Smarslik, who else would you put in there? Madsen's not that young, but he's a hell of a starter. Madsen, Seiferdinov.
Yep.
There's a tough bunch of guys around, as there always is. The world
doesn't stop.
No. The World Championship, every year, there's 6 or 8 guys in the World Championship that can cause you trouble, and Doyle's also one of them. He can cause anybody trouble. We got young Max Frick in there as well now. His first full year in the World Championship. It'll be a tough year for him if it starts.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just been the whole year for anybody involved in any sort of sport or business. It's just been a difficult, unpredictable, unforeseeable situation with the whole world, really.
It has.
And we just have to wait and see what transpires with all of that. And even if we do get a Speedway World Championship this year.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that happens. So I guess there's the other world sports are starting to put their calendars out and things in place. So hopefully it carries over as well.
The league racing in Poland has started to close stadiums.
Yep.
There's talk, nothing official, but I've heard rumours that the Speedway Grand Prix will take place, but it will all be in Poland. Mm-hmm. That's not official. That's just some whispers that I've heard from different parts of Europe. Hopefully there will be some sort of world championship this year, and hopefully I'm hoping that the league racing in the UK will start up again soon as well.
Do you feel that and touching base back to what you were saying before about the other riders coming through, like you won a title in 2004, 6 and 9. Do you feel that you moulded, say, Chris, Darcy, and Jason, like brought in that next era of Aussie rider sort of thing? Like, is that Darcy got his 3 under-21 titles as soon as you finished your last title? Like, do you think that you helped mould the future of Australian Speedway in that way? Or do you hope you did? Yeah,
I'd like to hope I did.
Yeah,
you know, I'd like to think that I showed the Aussie riders that you can be world champion.
Yep. Because it had been 50 years since, hasn't it?
Well, Jack Young was world champion in 1951, 52 or something.
You're the first person since that.
Yeah, so from 1952 to 2004 is a long time.
Yep.
You know, as a kid growing up, you know, who wants to be a Speedway rider, you've got to go to the other side of the world to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you look at world champions. I grew up looking at guys like Michael Lee, Bruce Penhall, Eric Gunderson, Hans Nielsen. You know, a great friend of mine, a Swedish rider, Per Jonsson, who was world champion. They were my heroes, if you like, when I was young, when I was a kid. From when I can remember, they're the guys I can remember. There's no Aussies in there.
No.
You know, and if you were watching road racing, it wasn't Mick wasn't on the scene at that time. You know, it was Kenny Roberts and
what do you got?
Freddie Spencer and Eddie Lawson.
And that. Yep.
Lucanelli and Uncini
Barry
and
Sheen.
Barry.
Yep.
Yeah, Barry. They were None of them were Aussies. And then Wayne Gardner came on.
Mm.
The first Australian motorcycling world champion in any discipline that I can remember or relate to is Wayne Gardner. So really, Wayne was the one that showed our generation that you could be a world champion coming from Australia. You know, we had Jeff Leask, who very nearly became motocross world champion.
Yep.
And then it took Mick doing, you know, it took Mick a little bit to kind of get there.
Yep.
And then kind of we had, you know, Chad came along and he had tremendous success in the US.
Yeah.
You know, we had some fantastic enduro riders, Shane Watts, you know, but there was a big period of time where Australia didn't have world champions.
Mm.
So I hope I did show the Aussie boys, especially the Speedway boys, that you could be world champion coming from Australia.
Yep. And you got to travel to the other side of the world.
Be very proud to think that I did anyway.
Yep.
You know, and then, you know, obviously once those things happened, Mick came along, you know, Troy Corser, Troy Bayliss.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
now we've got Toby Price doing what he's doing with
Yep.
his stuff, and Robbie Madison doing what he's doing. Chad's still in the US.
Till this morning.
Till this morning, yeah.
But he's still doing.
We've got Jack Miller, obviously, in MotoGP. We got Wayne's son Remy in Moto2. We've got Jet and Hunter Lawrence now stepping up into the next level in Supercross and Motocross, hopefully.
Yep. Bright stars too.
Yeah,
some really bright stars
seem to
through.
be. Yeah, seem to be. And Speedway, we've got some good young kids coming through as well.
Definitely, and some programs starting to happen too. Like I think it's Craig Boyce. Craig Boyce is
his ride experience,
doing the ride experience, just doing some things like that as well, which I think is good for the sport too.
Well, I've been doing some coaching since I stopped racing.
Yep.
Mine's a little different than the ride experience. The stuff I do is one-on-one coaching. I'm tending to work with riders that are probably a little beyond the ride experience, come and try sort of day stuff. But that's, you know, what Boise does with that is really good. And Boise's a great guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in the 2001 World Cup winning team in Poland. And
so who was that again? You had Boyce, Ryan Sullivan, yourself, Todd Wilshire,
and Lee.
And Lee Adams.
Yeah.
Who was team manager for that year?
Yeah, my granddad, Neil Street.
Neil Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That is an awesome year.
Yeah.
Yep.
We actually swapped after the qualifying event. Jason Lyons was in the team, but he didn't go very well in the qualifying meeting.
Yep.
So we swapped. We had Jason Lyons and Craig Boyce it was kind of almost a toss of the coin at that stage. Boise tended to do a bit better on the bigger stage. And he did do well in the final. He got at some crucial points in the final.
So he on that big stage, he really performed, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Boise, the last one-off world final, you have to remember, Boise was in a run-off for first place with Ricardson and Hans Nielsen in 94.
Yeah.
So, you know, Boise was a top rider. We were teammates in 94 at Poole in my first year in the Elite League in the UK.
How was that?
And I were teammates.
That would have been like, it's a long time ago now, but that's...
I still remember. I can still remember stuff from that year with
Really?
Boise. Yeah. It was...
First
I was
year
a kid, 18.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah.
Was that a good time being 18?
I had a higher average in Boise
And
as
Craig
well.
Boyce?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was a number
in one of
one
his best years too.
It was his best
Yeah.
year. I had a higher average than him that year. I was a number one for Poole that year.
In your first year?
Yeah.
It's a good way into it, isn't it? So you coming directly from Australia into that?
No, I'd been racing in England for a couple of years, but not in the Elite League.
Yep.
So, yeah. But Boise and I, Boise and I talk on the phone every couple of months. We normally
really
have a catch up, and Same with Steve Johnson from Perth. I speak to him quite a bit.
Oh, really?
I'm in touch with most of them.
The names you just rattled off there with road racing, everything like that, have you got a bit of an encyclopedia? Like, do you just love other forms as well? Because you just rattled off like a whole bunch of names of deep into road racing history, obviously Supercross and that. Do you like the other forms of?
Yeah. I like race. I like motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
And I like the history of racing.
Yep.
Obviously, you know, the everything moves forward all the time at a rapid rate. I'm a big fan of the history of all sports.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, like I said before about Ivan Major and Ollie Olsen and all these guys that raced well before me.
Yep.
But they shaped Speedway into what it was for me to be able to have a career out of it. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for those guys, and you know, I enjoy the company of most of the former riders that I've met.
Yep.
You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to guys like Ivan or Barry Briggs quite easily because I'd known them for a long time through my father.
Yeah.
I had dinner with Ronnie Moore in New Zealand years and years ago. That was unreal. Guys like Ovi Funden and Bjorn Knudsen, you know, having raced in Sweden for so many years, you see them at different times. And Zenon Plek, who was probably, you know, the top Polish guy before Thomas Golub came along in the 70s and 80s. He was my coach in Polish League for a couple of years, and then my coach in Polish League for many, many years at different clubs even was Marek Cieślak, and he was a Polish national manager. So he was my coach for my league racing in Poland.
Yeah.
And we'd come to the World Cup and he was a Polish manager. So we were competing against each other.
There's so many crossovers in the sport, hey?
It's nuts.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow.
So kind of funny. But you know, the road racing, the rivalries from road racing from like Barry and Kenny Roberts to Freddie Spencer and Kenny and Eddie Lawson came in, and then Rainey and Schwantz and Mick. Yep. Wayne Gardner. I loved it all. I'm a huge fan of it all.
And you've tried your hand at the road bike stuff for a bit as well.
Not really.
Not road, but you've done track days and stuff, haven't you?
A few. Very average on any other sort of motorbike apart from a speedway bike.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Do you enjoy it though?
I enjoy riding all sorts of motorbikes. But yeah, you know, it's sometimes difficult to know where your limits are on other sorts of motorbikes. A speedway bike is clearly what I can ride, and it's, you know, Troy and I went through a stage where we were riding dirt bikes. You know, we'd go out to QMP or we'd go out to the bush out the back or somewhere, and like he's, you know, we were just goon riders. We were, you know, like probably on our ass more times than we weren't.
Troy,
you know,
Bayless, yep.
And you know, it was good fun, and we'd like drag race up and down this, you know, just being clowns, really.
Just fun.
Yeah.
There's did the Troy Bayless Classics bring back good memories?
Yeah, they were good fun.
It was enjoyable.
They were, you know, it was tough racing.
For sure.
I mean, you know, it was difficult racing, and it was great for dirt track, and it was great for motorcycling in general that Troy and Kim put a huge amount of time and effort into doing what they did there with them, and bringing guys like Jared Mees and Sammy Halbert, Henry Wiles, Jake Johnson,
Brad Baker,
Brad the Bullet. Yeah. You know, tremendous effort to get those sort of guys over here, and I'm proud to have been a small part of what they were.
Yep.
Shame they're not on anymore, really.
Yeah.
It was... Yeah, it's a difficult one because they obviously put a lot into 3 or 4, 5 years, however many it was, and no one took it up, did they? After they kind of stepped away from it, no one took it up and continued it going, which was a shame.
It was some of their best. Well, I think best dirt track events for sure, no doubt, but some of the best actual motorcycling events in general for Australia.
Yeah. Would definitely agree.
Attendance, the amount of entries, everything. It was
and look, they suffered a bit of bad luck with the weather a few times as well, didn't they? I mean, to have rain in Taree in January is pretty unusual.
Yeah, that one in particular where it was just, it was a crazy time, but really good events. And same with the Moto Expo, obviously, where you had the dirt track part of that. And you enjoy riding the dirt bike side of it as well.
Yeah, and I honestly, when it all first started out, I was pretty poor, and I think I kind of got going half okay in the end. And Jeff Leask was the boss of KTM at that time and gave me tremendous amount of support to do what I was doing. And honestly, if it wouldn't have been for Jeff and KTM, I probably wouldn't have got into it as much as what I did.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, it was with huge thanks to them that I was able to do what I did with all of that stuff. And I think I kind of got going a whole lot better at the end by the time it had all finished, I think I was going okay at it.
For sure.
Nowhere near good enough to make the final of the outright final of the Troy Bayliss Classic, but I could kind of win a race here and there and
put on a good show.
Have a bit more fun.
Yeah, no, I remember they did it at the MotoGP one year. I think they did 1 year there, and I got some photos. I remember just clear as day of you're backing it in, you're sliding it, it just looked like a speedway bike on hard pack.
That was a funny track at Phillip Island. That one, I actually I very nearly beat Jared Mees there one day.
Yeah, right.
I led him for 3 laps in a 4-lap race, and I really thought I'd done him.
That was exciting to watch.
It was a small track as well, wasn't it?
It was more like an American, short track.
Yeah,
it was, and very hard pack, obviously.
Yeah,
and it was good to watch.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Now, Dust Hustles, you've done that a couple of times as exhibition.
Yeah,
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, they're good days.
Good days as well.
You can go and just ride around, and if whatever
no stress.
whatever the sort of pace you want to carry out on whatever you're riding, that's all you have to do.
Yeah,
I rode the Indian.
Yeah, the FTR 1200.
Against Chris. He was riding the Harley, and we had some fun on that. I ended up actually slipping off the Indian, and I was glad I'd had my Weet-Bix that morning, so I had the strength to pick it up.
Yeah, because it'd be a bit heavier than the normal speedway bike.
Oh yeah, much heavier.
They definitely a great event, and having Chris Vermeulen, yourself out on track, and many others, it's good.
You get all the freestyle guys up there as well, so they're kind of they're a handful because they're just on the gas mental. All the time.
And you get Michael Kirkness coming in, as well. You get some good people there.
Yeah, and that's right, and they're fun days to just like I said, if you want to go out and try and go fast, then you can. If you just want to idle around and be one of the guys to tootle around, you also have some fun.
Just good fun.
Yeah.
So now we're 2020. We're 8 years after official retirement.
It's actually funny because I never really, probably never really retired. I just kind of moved away. I stopped riding in the Grand Prix.
Yep.
I retired from the Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. And that's a funny thing because I did actually retire from the Grand Prix.
Yep.
There's a lot of riders that say they're retiring from the Grand Prix, but they're actually not retiring from the Grand Prix. They're not inside the top 8. Yep. They're actually eliminated. So I was proud of the fact that I think I was number 5 or 6 in the world the year I retired.
So you had selection for 13 already locked away. Yep.
I actually had a spot in the Grand Prix for the following year. Andreas Jonsson, the Swedish rider, he finished 9th in the World Championship that year. So when I said that I wasn't riding, he actually moved up a spot.
Yep.
And he got automatic qualification because I gave my spot up. As far as the league racing went, I had planned on actually racing for a year or two more, but as things turned out when I stopped riding in the Grand Prix, I kind of just never went. It never happened.
Really?
It wasn't that I said that's, there was no retirement meeting or no farewell party or, no gold watch. I just kind of didn't ride anymore. And I didn't ride for a few years, and then I did a few meetings in Aussie and a few more meetings, and
Did you just get sick of it at the time?
Got sick of the Grand Prix.
The Grand Prix.
Got sick of I got burnt out.
Yeah.
Because I'd been doing it for a long time, and you put a lot of effort into something for a long time, and I was worn out from it.
Yeah.
I probably should have just had a year off and gone back and continued to ride. Instead, I waited 8 years, and then.
So here we are, 8 years later. So you went
waiting to have another go. I was in the UK for the start of the season this year. I was only there for 8 days before COVID made me come home.
So you've signed up for Ipswich?
Yeah, I've signed for Ipswich, and hopefully we'll get to start. Hopefully the British season will start beginning to middle of August.
Yeah, nice.
Obviously, clearly a much shorter season than normally would have happened, but hopefully enough of a season to get some results out of it.
So you'll go over there with the family?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Seth, your son, races road bikes.
Yeah.
And he's got some road racing happening too.
Yeah, he's racing BSB this year.
On a 400?
Yeah.
Yep. That's an awesome start, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll head over in probably within the next couple of weeks, and all things working out well, we'll head over in a couple of weeks, and
yep.
I think the testing for Seth starts in the middle of July, and hopefully Speedway starts pretty well, beginning to middle of August.
It's going to be a lot different this time than obviously last, like your kid's older, obviously Seth's older. Is that going to be, I think that should be fun, shouldn't it?
I hope it will be fun. I want it to be fun.
Yeah.
I want to go and have some fun racing. I'm not obviously trying to be world champion, so I don't have that that huge nugget of trying to be world champion weighing me down.
Mm-hmm.
I can hopefully go and enjoy racing. I hope I can be more of a team player in the team I'm in, like Ipswich.
Yep.
Jake Allen from Brisbane races for them. Cameron Heaps is a young Aussie from Perth. He also races there. There's a young English kid called Drew Kemp. He's 17, 18. I want to be able to pass my knowledge and experience onto those guys, and I want to make us a really, really good team.
The proper team again. Yep.
where we're racing for each other, and hopefully, I think we're a good enough team. Like in a normal year, I think we would be a good enough team comparing against the other teams in that league that we would be able to win. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I still have to race and score points because I'm a contributing member of the team.
Yep.
But I think that, maybe my strength won't be scoring 14 or 15 points like it used to be. It may be that I can get people scoring a few more points, all the riders in the team scoring a few more points than they maybe ordinarily would.
That'd be the ideal thing, like a nice consistent.
Yeah, I'm. Obviously, I've got targets for myself, and the club have targets that they want me to try and hit.
Yep.
And they're most definitely not the number of points that I used to score, because I know it would be almost impossible for me to do that.
It's coming back to that, like you were saying before. You've got to be smart. You got to think about
having respect for your opponents.
For the other opponents. Yep.
Yeah, and that's right. I'm 44 years old.
Yep.
And I'm probably not going to be as hard a rider as I was when I was 34 years old. But that's to be expected.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll be a cleverer rider than I was when I was 34, and I can maybe hopefully race at just about the same level.
Yep. Makes sense. And I think on a personal level, it's got to be good for the sport too. It's a draw. You've got a 3-time world champion coming back into elite league.
Look, there was a lot of excitement in the UK about the start of the 2020 season. I was obviously going back to ride for Ipswich. Nicky Pedersen was back to ride for Sheffield, and there was a lot of positive vibes about Speedway. And unfortunately, it's everything's been thrown on hold, and difficult time for the whole world.
Yeah, no, definitely. Every person's feeling the wrath of it.
Yeah.
Is there any people that you want to thank along the way, or anything that you need to shout out for the journey ahead, or anything?
Yeah, there's many people to thank for everything. I mean, racing's you have to have sponsors. So of course, all of my sponsors I'm grateful for, and all of my friends that have supported me along the way, and all the support that I had from different people and different companies in Australia has always been very, very welcome. And, lots of people that I see tell me that they used to sit up all night on Sunday night to watch the Speedway, or the early hours Sunday morning to watch the Speedway from Europe on Saturday night over there. And, I'm glad that I gave them some moments that they enjoyed, and gave them some nights that were worth sitting up to watch. Not all of them, but I think I gave a lot of nights that were worth sitting up to watch. So, I'm very thankful for all the support I got from here.
Awesome. Well, mate, on my side, if I could have pitched myself at, at teenage years, watching you at, say, a Series 500 Grand Prix, Series 500 race, I'd be sitting here these years later talking to you for an hour and a half on a podcast. It would never have happened. So thank you so much for it, mate. I do appreciate
no problem. It took a little bit of organising, but we got there in the end.
Oh, we've had a few spinners thrown in there, but mate, it's been fantastic. And thank you for your time, and hope you and your family have a really good trip over there. And it's a great rest of 2020.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.